Dana, what's the temperature down there?
Hot enough to break my AC 2 days ago.
There you go. No. Well, at least it didn't wait till August.
Yeah, I'm always thankful for that.
Ready to begin? Okay, it is May 18th, 2022, 6:02 p.m. And this meeting is now called to order. The first item on the agenda is the consideration of the... Okay, certainly. Yes. Present. Present.
Present. And Ian Jordan for the record, and Semway and Justin.
All righty. Now, the first item on the agenda is a consideration of the April 21st, 2022 meeting minutes. You take that from here? the consideration of the minutes?
I think everybody.
I move that we accept the minutes as written.
Second.
I would like to call for a vote on the consideration of the April 21st, 2022 meeting minutes. Aye.
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 Motion passed. Item B on tonight's agenda is the public hearing and consideration of ordinance number 881, a text amendment to allow public and private utility facilities to be located in the transitional and commercial zoning districts with an approved conditional use permit. Case number ZTA-22-01.
Dana?
I thank you very much, Chairman, Commissioners, convening this afternoon. As you mentioned, this agenda item is a text amendment to our zoning ordinance, and I will take you through a brief presentation. I think you've seen a bit of it, so I'll try and keep it brief. And so the purpose of this evening's meeting is to, number one, hold the public hearing after you hear presentation. We do some question and answer with staff, should you have any questions. And then at that time, if there's no further questions, open a public hearing, allow the public to speak, and then close that. And then you're welcome to move forward with making a motion. So with that, can everybody see the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Look at excellent.
I can't hear you very well though, Dana. Your volume is really low.
I do them very loud. Really not.
Dana?
Okay, how's that sound? Is it better?
Well, outside voice.
Better? I can speak with my outside voice then. All right, very good. Just stop me if you need me to project louder.
Still a little soft, but outside voice, you should be okay.
So what are the public and private utility facilities? It's basically any campus type facility or a major portion of what that utility company serves, not including transmission lines and the minimal other types of infrastructure and piping, plumbing, and so forth that goes along with public utilities. We have some examples here: water treatment campus, a wastewater treatment campus, electrical substations are considered public utility as well, or private utility, and then natural gas type related facilities. So currently the city allows these types of facilities in our residential districts with an approved conditional use permit. However, it negates to include in our commercial districts, and that's where we realize, commercial areas tend to have a higher demand in many respects, depending on what it is, for certain utilities and facilities. So we thought it would only make sense to allow that also in commercial zoning districts through the conditional use permit process, which basically, as you know, CUPs or conditional use permits come before the Planning and Zoning Commission for final approval. A few of our land uses actually go to City Council by ordinance. So that's what's before you this afternoon. The proposed commercial district language, and it would go into the TR, which is actually a transitional residential district, the NS, neighborhood services and shopping. C2 is our intermediate commercial district, and then C3 is our most intense commercial zoning district. And really C2 and C3 consume or are established over all of our highway corridors in downtown as well. And what that language would read is consistent with what the existing residential language reads, with the exception that we don't prohibit offices. The residential language does prohibit offices and yards and things like that that aren't necessarily good in residential districts or neighborhoods. And so the language simply reads, utility buildings and facilities when necessary for serving the surrounding territory, subject to securing a conditional use permit, therefore, and provided further that no use permit shall be required for the construction of power or pipelines necessary to serve the surrounding territory. So we did not create any new language there, but what we did do is go ahead and also include a definition and define that in our ordinance, so we know how that is defined. So with that said, I think I reviewed the schedule with you. Public comment is required, and anytime the zoning code is changed or a zoning map amendment is proposed, or prior to its change or proposed, we're required to hold a citizen review meeting by statute, and that was held back on May 9th. Then this evening, Planning and Zoning Commission is holding their public hearing that's been advertised in the newspaper, as well as in water bills going out to the public or property owners or service account owners in the city, advising them of these meetings. And then you would make a recommendation to City Council. If you do that this evening, we have it scheduled to go before City Council next Tuesday, May 24th. So staff recommendation, so staff did not receive any comment on this particular item via email or at the 9th meeting. We had 3 people in attendance and neither 3 were interested to make comment on this topic. So staff recommends the Planning and Zoning Commission move to recommend the council approve Ordinance 881 to allow public and private utility facilities in the transitional and commercial zoning districts. I'd be happy to respond to any questions.
Does anyone have any specific questions about the agenda item? Well, we can move on to,
I motion that we accept it as written.
Just read it, Tracy, right here. The recommended motion, just read it.
And then Chairman, if you could open up the public hearing by striking your gavel and asking anyone who wishes to speak on this topic to approach the podium and state their name and address prior to a motion.
You have to ask her for.
You can open it up without having those.
No, that's for, I'm pretty sure everyone's here to comment on the other issue, right? You're not here to talk about the utilities.
most of these are about, some are blank, but most of them are about the group home deal. But we could still open it to the public for hearing.
So we need to
No,
have
we need to
2
separate it.
separate public hearings. So this is the one on the utility. So even though there's no one to speak here, you're gonna open, gavel, open a public hearing. We look around, no one comes up, you close the public hearing, but legally we have to initiate, open and shut the public hearing for each separately, individually.
Okay,
So that would be up to you.
okay. So we could, if there is anyone who wants to comment on this, we could open it for public hearing. And
And Chairman, go ahead and strike your gavel and say the public hearing's open.
public hearing is open.
Then I don't think anybody here wants to talk about this one. So, Mr. Chairman, I see no one approaching and wanting to speak, so you can go ahead and close the public hearing.
Okay, this public hearing is now closed.
Recommend the council approve ordinance number 881 to allow public and private utility facilities in the transitional and commercial zoning districts. Case number ZTA 2201.
I'll second that motion.
Motion is seconded. We shall Move on to a vote. All in favor? Aye.
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 Motion is unanimous. Motion passed. Now we shall move on to what appears to be the bigger topic tonight, item C, which is the public hearing and consideration of ordinance number 882, a text amendment to allow group homes for the handicapped and substance abuse recovery residences to be located in the residential zoning districts, case number ZTA-22-02. Dana, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you for.
Thank you very much, Chairman, Commissioners. Again, another text amendment to our zoning code, and equally requires that same process, so that public hearing, open and close process. You may have some public input. I'll get into those details. So the city has one section or one provision in the zoning ordinance. It's in our R143 zoning district. That's our single family acre lot minimum zoning district, which we do not have on our map. We have not mapped any of that district in our existing zoning map, but it does allow for group homes through the conditional use permit process. Group homes have been a popular topic in the recent years as boomers are aging. The state got involved and preempted some city regulations to require and allow for group homes in residential settings. So what is a group home? A typical home that provides various levels of supervision to, yes.
Can you enlarge your slide?
Sorry, yes. All right, I picked the wrong screen here. Hang on one second. Apologies, I did. Sorry. How's that? Coming? There we go. Very good. So a group home is basically a typical home in a neighborhood that provides various levels of supervision to a number of unrelated individuals. Most commonly, what we see are seniors or persons with a developmental disability or disability of some sort. And the state, as I mentioned, adopted legislation, about a decade ago, and said, you know, cities need to allow these. It might have been less than a decade, maybe in the last 5 years. Cities need to allow these. They can't treat this type of home for people up to six unrelated people in the same home receiving care, exclusive of the staff. They need to allow that to occur. And that's basically a by right zoning. If a single family is allowed in it, then this type of activity can happen there. The other type of group homes that we're proposing to address tonight in our zoning code are sober living homes or residential recovery centers or residential treatment centers for people with substance abuse, recovering from substance abuses. And they're different items, and you'll see through this text amendment that we treat them differently. And they have different regulations as well at the state. So how do other cities regulate? A lot of different ways. Specific regulations depending on the type of home. Most common is the elderly care or the disabled care that's preempted by the statutes, requiring cities to allow them to occur or to be an allowed use. And then, and what the statute, as well as what most other communities do, are limit the number of people, either 6 to 10 residents, limit the number of trips per day to the residents, so we maintain that residential character and not have more of a commercial activity in our neighborhoods. Minimum distance separations from other similar uses to avoid an institutionalized area in the community that's known for those group homes or whatever. So there's a 1,200 foot separation required in the statute, as well as in most of those cities that have an ordinance. Parking considerations, make sure that we don't have a bunch of cars sitting in the street. We want them all to be capable of supporting their guest parking and staff parking on site. And then there's, they do use various different types of approvals. But like I mentioned, up to 6 is allowed by right, and that's how we have our code written for group homes specifically. Just to show you the existing group homes in the community, one located right here at Sutherland, and then out on the east side, out the 70, we have 3 homes there in that Crestline neighborhood. And that's all we have on record as of now. So suggested language for group homes is, like I said, consistent with the statute and what we found in some other codes. Basically, they're allowed in all our residential districts, including the TR Transitional Residential District. Can't be located within 1,200 feet of another home, as the crow flies. Or should the ultimately City Council also adopt on your recommendation, recovery home or recovery residence code, we just same reason to separate these uses. We don't want a conglomeration in one area or institutionalize one area. Unless it's separated by the highway. That's really our only 100-foot right of way we have in town that I'm aware of. So obviously there's 2 separate neighborhoods on either side of the highway, and that wouldn't have that similar conflict that you would see in the same neighborhood. That's not separated by a highway. Also, no such home is to contain more than 6 residents, including care staff. Such home is licensed by the state of Arizona Health Services Department. Such home is registered with the city as well. So we're aware of it, and there's a zoning approval process involved, which is us making sure that it meets that 1,200-foot distance separation, fire review on what's being proposed, and then another building code as necessary, and that type of city review would occur. And then finally, all parking for guests shall meet the parking code requirement, which says single-family homes are required to have 2 off-street parking spaces on site. And then again, we also defined in our ordinance, or are proposing with this language, definitions to define a group home, and under group home, a subsection of what handicap individual entails, and then a separate definition for recovery home. And that's how we navigate the very complex legislation in federal acts of Fair Housing and American with Disabilities Acts. But we think our language is tried and true, actually, from other communities, and gives us a lot of coverage for how we permit those types of activities and how we distinguish one from the other. So the language to permit recovery residences, maybe a typo. Basically, again, in all the residential zoning districts by a conditional use permit process. So now, unlike the group homes that we just discussed, that the state said, hey, you gotta let these in anyway, up to 6 people, recovery residences don't have that same protection and preemption. And we say we would like to see those through the conditional use permit process. So we have the ability to really look at the nuts and bolts and details of who's operating this, how it's being operated, how it is proposed to be operated, where it's going, what type of structure, who's impacted, and give a public hearing process, much like what we're doing right now. And there would be a notification, as you know, with conditional use permits of all property owners within 300 feet, as well as a sign posted on the property frontage to advertise hearings. That said, recovery residences, as this code is proposed, identifies that they need to comply with that group home section, which is maximum of 6 people. And so forth. And then in addition, we have item number 2, the applicant shall submit and maintain compliance with all operations and management, with an operations management plan that we'll review, and that would be part of a use permit request in accordance with applicable Arizona revised statute. Statutes for this type of facility are pretty involved and request exactly that and some. So we'll basically ultimately request a copy of what was submitted to the state and what the state is pending to permit if they are considering licensing a home for this type of use. And then we have just a basic description of minimum information required to be submitted. Name and address, obviously, contact and who's in control of the property that and can be part of that O&M plan would be, they would need to be there within what, a half hour or an hour or something like that. Obviously, you can review that should one be applied for and come before you through the CUP process. If the business owner or property owner are not the same person and entity, we need to notarize a letter from the property owner, obviously, emergency contact, number of persons occupying each bedroom. We know right now we're proposing 6, a maximum of 6 people total, aside from the care staff. The maximum number of occupants, again, is 6 as it's currently written. Floor plan we would need to see, resident screening process, and guest and resident rules of conduct as well. So that's the information that would be required in an application for a conditional use permit for recovery residents. Very same schedule that we just reviewed. On May 9th, we held a citizen review meeting, and you know you're making a recommendation possibly today. That could go to council if you do on the 24th. In that public review process on the 9th, we did, or since then, again, we had 3 members of the public in attendance, no detailed, no comment, pro or con. But since then, we did receive 2 comments, and then I see we may have public input today as well. We did receive a letter from a Dr. Will Richardson, who happens to be the owner of the Nosker Hill former bed and breakfast or school, which is located in a residential district neighborhood, and they are requesting the Planning Commission consider adding subsection 3. So the current language is here, subsection 1 and 2, and then they're asking for a 3rd subsection that states the Planning and Zoning Commission may approve a home to contain more than 6 residents through the conditional use permit process if the subject facility, A, is an existing structure, B, complies with all applicable fire building code requirements for the occupancy being requested. So again, this is only for somebody asking for more than 6 residents in a home through the use permit process. Receives a state license for that occupancy as well, and then finally is found to have adequate access for the additional traffic volumes generated, because obviously we intend or expect the more occupants, the more guests, the more therapists and staff and things like that, that then becomes something we need to be very careful in evaluating how it impacts the neighborhood. And from a traffic and volume standpoint, and maintains the surrounding neighborhood character. And that's the whole goal. We don't want to impact or change that character from a nice, quiet residential setting, ideally. We did receive email opposing this language, opposing group homes, this whole ordinance. As I read the comment, you did receive this in email earlier today, but I'll read it quickly for the record. It was provided by Mr. Hunsacker, Tanner Hunsacker. I understand the need for local jobs, the importance in maintaining aging properties, and the care facilities are becoming more important than ever. My support fails when considering the location of these facilities in residential neighborhoods. I do not want this type of business next to my home! Exclamation point. Similar to other care facilities, they would be better positioned in areas easily located for concerned families with wider roads, adequate lighting, and parking for care professionals, and the potential of emergency vehicles when needed. I do not know what the occupant load is being considered. Just for your information, it's 6. But if a care facility is to operate in a residential neighborhood, I suggest no more than 6 great. No more than 6, including care professionals, regardless of the size of the facility. So he's suggesting 6 max with care staff. Without a limit, there is no way to govern how many bodies can be crammed in any space. Ultimately, families will leave, values will fall, resulting in blight. Please help. So again, now keep in mind as at present, the state allows or would have a problem with the city restricting somebody from running a group home, as we define it, not a recovery home, but a group home of 6, excluding staff. So if we were to write that, if we were to reduce, if we were to include with staff, a total of 6 people with staff, we'd be in violation of that statute. If our attorney was here, he would say, you don't want to, get us in trouble with the state. So anyway, however, that does not apply to the recovery center. You're open to have that conversation of how that applies to the recovery center. So those are the 2 comments we did receive. Staff is recommending the council, the Planning and Zoning Commission move to recommend the council approve ordinance 882 to allow group homes for the handicapped and substance abuse recovery residences to be located in the residential zoning districts as we're proposing. If for the Planning and Zoning Commission or any commissioners are interested to entertain the request by Dr. Will Richardson to allow for more, there is that you would amend the staff's recommendation to allow the language suggested by Will Richardson, or however you choose to reconfigure that or approach that type of idea. I will tell you, when I did see that, I thought, that's interesting. I have become aware recently of a property down here near the community center that's for sale. It's commercial. This is a free advertisement for them. It was originally, I believe, developed as a church facility because it's in kind of a church row here, facility type area off Hagen and Ice House Canyon Road. And I did some research when they asked, well, it's an R16, so the yellow is R16 zoning district. And that allows one single family home on any lot. So I was curious of how did such a big facility, if you look at it, it's a metal building, it's got a lot of different rooms, almost like a motel or something like that, or a church with offices. But apparently that's what it was originally. Then it moved to substance abuse recovery or an alcohol recovery facility in the early teens of this year. And then it's changed a few hands and now it's sitting vacant and for sale. So once we saw that, like, yeah, that's interesting. Obviously it's a large building. It's maybe 6,000 or 8,000 square feet. It could potentially contain more residents, in that group home or recovery home type setting. So we started looking around thinking, well, what other properties? Now we're aware of the Nascar Hill schoolhouse, which, right now in the R2 district, and that would be located way up here. So all the purple lettering with the red pins are these larger buildings that we've identified in residential districts that could potentially benefit from that type of language proposed by Dr. Will. But they own Nascar Hill again, and as it stands, any of these buildings are any of the buildings in the brown area you see on the map, zoning map, that's R2. That's our multifamily district, our only multifamily district. It's allowed to have apartment building. There's a density allowed, I think, on that particular parcel. Speaking of Nascar Hill, could potentially allow up to, based on our zoning regulations, like 25 or 30 residents or apartment units on the property by right. Somebody could go buy that, carve it up into apartments, or demo it and build an apartment building, but carve it up and have that density of individual units. So anyway, another property, here's another R16. I believe this one's also for sale. It's a large building right off South Street. It probably should be commercial, but it's not. It's an office building, purpose-built. Then we have a handful of older, maybe churches. The funeral home, for some reason, is located in R2. Right here, it's a large building, a church property, and then another church property. And so churches, schools are allowed by right in R2. Just to put that in perspective, that's how they end up, I guess, at those locations. Once they're no longer used as a church or a school, what is that other use? And right now our zoning code doesn't really provide for any other options but multifamily. So with that, I recommend you adopt language as staff proposes. And if you wish to make an amendment, you have the language there. I'd be happy to respond to any questions.
Does anyone have any questions? Dana, I do have one question about the occupancy. Currently, as it's written, it's a maximum of 6 residents and not including staff, healthcare staff. Is there a limit on the number of healthcare staff? Maybe it's defined separately, but is there a maximum number of healthcare staff that can be associated with the given group home?
Chairman Mahika, no. Obviously, this is a business enterprise, either be it private or nonprofit, for-profit or nonprofit. So I know typically, coincidentally, I just issued or re-evaluated 2 business licenses that came up and changed for two of the 4 yellow existing group homes that you saw on that map. Anyway, they tend to have two staff members that have a shift change by 2 other staff members. I've heard that in other situations too.
Okay.
But my point being, obviously, it wouldn't be profitable if they have too many staff, and nor effective if they had too little staff. So my position's been just expect, and the statute doesn't give any further guidance in that area either. I do think their applications to the state, though, they have to explain a little more detail how it's being serviced and what their expertise is and their credentials are of the staff on site.
Chairman, I do have a question. Go ahead, Mary. It's okay. Go
Are
ahead.
you sure?
Yeah.
Dana, you mentioned that there are already 3 group homes in kind of southeast globe. Can you bring up that map again? Are those group homes, do they fall into either of these categories of?
Yes, that would be group home. They're for the elderly or disabled care. And just to let you know, they are these 2. This one right here on Hunter Drive is within 1,200 feet.
Dana.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Oh my God.
You were painting such a beautiful picture, I could imagine it.
You saw it in your head. Thank you, Mary. Here we are. These 3 down on Crestline. So this one is within 1,200 feet of this one, as well as this one. I guess the state at the time when they issued the license are particular. Yes.
Okay. And then are there any existing sober living facilities or recovery centers in Globe right now?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Thank you. That answers my question. Thank you.
Dana, I've got a question about what Dr. Richardson, what he's asking for, rather than making it where that would just be a blanket thing that said, okay, you're big enough, you could have more residents, more patients, whatever you want to call them. Couldn't it be like a case by case where they would come? Say, for instance, the building that you showed first, that's out by the churches, that's out on Hagen Road and basically out in the middle of nowhere relative to where, say, for instance, Nosker Hill is, where that one would make way more sense to have more than 6. It has the road structure, looks like maybe even the parking and so on, where a smaller place in a tight neighborhood would not be able to accommodate. So could it be a case by case rather than making it just in here because this doctor has politely asked to increase it for his specific needs?
Absolutely. Through the use, Chairman, Commissioner Quick, through the use permit process, that's where we have the ability to evaluate that what's being proposed.
Okay, so there's no.
And say that's a lot of people. For instance, if it's more dense than what a multifamily home would be allowed to, or building would be allowed, we would say no.
Right.
Or we recommend it being less because it's exceeding the density that's allowed in that district. Outside of having that density calculation, I think we would develop a criteria, should you wish to go down this road, saying, okay, how many rooms, or it's one person per room. So show me your rooms, minimum room of X by X, 10 by 10. How many restroom facilities do you have? What's your kitchen facility like? And just do an overall analysis of that occupancy being requested based on the facilities available or being improved to house them.
So
So we would have a lot of flexibility through that process to look at those details and make a informed decision.
So then there's no need really for us to amend what's already written up for the maximum of 6, because it can be addressed individual basis.
It can, and yeah, aside from putting a cap, because like I said, I go through and I see these other buildings, like, yeah, who knows, what that density would be. Yeah, in lieu of, it gives you the most opportunity to consider somebody's request.
Thank you.
I'd like to add though, if I was hearing what you were saying correctly, even if each individual application or individual proposition for one of these group homes is handled on a case-by-case basis, the maximum is still 6. So you with the way it's currently worded, you can't really consider one that is requesting for more than 6 occupants. Is that correct?
With a conditional use permit, right? You could?
With the proposed text amendment, they could for recovery homes is what's being suggested by the property owner or a property owner in the city. I don't see. So let's take any of these buildings. Why, if they could house and take care of elderly and developmentally disabled people as well, maybe they should get that same, offer that same opportunity. So I'm coming around to thinking that, to your point, Dylan, that if it's applicable to one, maybe it's applicable to both group homes and recovery homes, recovery residences. So they could either have a recovery residence with more than 6 through the use permit process, or more than 6 elderly in one of these larger buildings that we have in the neighborhoods of more than 6. So I would make that amendment, or I would suggest doing that. Why just give it to a recovery home? And it's the elderly and disabled care is definitely more prevalent of a business.
Yeah, that is kind of a concern of mine as well. It's specific to the recovery residents as opposed to elderly or handicapped. So that is something to consider.
Yeah, so in that situation, then I would take that language suggested, I would put that as a subsection in group homes, because we know the recovery language says you need to comply with the group home section plus this. So if we allow by use permit, somebody proposed more than 6, be it group home for the care for the elderly or recovery center, then that covers that. So I would actually move that language to the group home discussion, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And I can walk you through, if you guys are interested in going down that road here, I can walk you through that, how that would read.
Can I just repeat something so that I understand? Because I think you asked a really good question, Tracy. So we're talking about that the language for both group homes and recovery homes would say that the no home contains more than 6 residents, excluding care staff. But then we're also discussing whether or not to add in that third sub-bullet of the conditional use permit to evaluate on a case-by-case basis whether or not a facility can house more people in either a group or a recovery home. Is that what we're talking about right now? Yeah,
I think that's what I'm talking about.
yeah, I like to confirm, I like to make sure I know, because, still learning.
It looks like Dr. Richardson's specific text amendment request is exclusively about the recovery residents, though, so if his,
Well, I mean, he's just suggesting that, right? But we
Sure,
would be, we would take it and say, okay, this is what we think it should be for the town. Does that, I think, right?
right, yeah.
We don't have to
we
take
could-
exactly what he says.
We could suggest the amendment and then outline what we would like, how we would like to see it worded, which kind of sounds like in the inclusion of elderly or handicap care along with recovery residents would be more holistic in its approach, as it would refer to the group homes more in general rather than the recovery residences specifically. But as it stands, as it's currently worded based on Dr. Richardson's request is that it's about recovery residences. And I think that instead of being exclusive to the recovery residences, if we were to make any such amendment to potentially allow more than 6, it should probably encompass more than just recovery residences alone.
Okay.
It would be either that or of course approving of the way that it's currently written without having any additional amendments to it.
I think, Chairman, for myself, I feel like I've gotten the information that I need from Dana's presentation. I feel now like I might like to hear from the public. I'm not sure if others would join me. in
I'd
that.
actually like to hear what Dana was just getting ready to walk us through
Oh,
to
I'm
see
sorry.
exactly what's going on, because he was setting up, I think, to
Oh,
do,
I'm sorry.
to show us. So yeah, I would like to hear that if Dana would do that.
Chairman, Commissioner Quick. So I have the language pulled up here. Basically, we would strike this top section. Can you see my mouse by chance? No. But we'll grab the Planning and Zoning Commission may approve a home, and the way that's written could apply to recovery or group. So we just take this exact language, and rather than put it down in recovery homes, so the Planning and Zoning Commission may approve a home to contain more than 6 residents through the conditional use permit process if the subject facility is an existing structure. And that's what we're talking about. We've got big existing structures. We don't want, or we would probably have a more difficult time with somebody going in purpose building a structure that houses a lot of people in a residential area. I don't know, but that's how it's written. So I like how it's written to limit that scope of the options. What could go into a residence. So is an existing structure, it complies with all applicable fire and building codes and occupancy requirements, receives a state license for said occupancy, and is found to have the adequate access and trip generation, and that'll maintain the surrounding neighborhood character. So in lieu of putting that as a 3, it would just go as a 6 underneath suggested language for group homes. So that language would fall right under as a 6 in this section. And then, and then the recovery home says maintain compliance with group homes for the handicap criteria of this section. The group home criteria. These are in the same section. You know what? We'll do a tweak. Maintain compliance with group home requirements for this zone, for the handicap for the zoning district. So that then it'll revert up to here. Group homes, and it'll have a 6. You can ask for more than 6 by use permit if you meet this criteria, or if it's found that you meet that criteria. Does that make sense? I learned a few things.
Yes.
Explain. Okay, very good.
Okay, any other questions before we move it open to the public?
Thank you. No, I'm good.
We will now open it for public discussion, if anyone would like to come up and speak.
Okay, so go ahead and jump up to the podium because we're on YouTube. And then make sure that mic's on too. Thank you.
Can you hear me? So, Lisa Brazil, I live in the neighborhood. I think we're on a slippery slope here, actually. I have spent years as a mental health professional running homeless programs, substance abuse, severely mentally ill. I actually heard Dana say up to 6 people. However, because of the conditional use permit and the square footage, we can go up to 25. He also pointed to a number of properties. The last time I was at the courthouse, I drove by the hospital. It said for sale and lease. My experience in working with people who have had substance abuse issues, they've also had mental health issues. Where are those services? What happens when somebody gets a batch of heroin? Who do we call? Where does that happen? They're roaming in the neighborhood. We got the parks right next to us. And I'm not one of those people, not my neighborhood, but I think specifically as it relates to Nosker Hill, you're talking about a slippery slope because I heard him clearly say up to 25. You got parks where the kids play baseball. You have all sorts of things going on there. And where are the mental health services? Because when there are substance abuse issues, there are mental health services that are needed. So you say in-house. Well, what does that mean? Okay, so it's in. So all the doors are locked. They don't get out. I mean, you're talking about a lot of issues that I don't think are have clearly been examined, especially as it relates to the people that live in that neighborhood. I think you need to look at this very closely because there are facilities out there. You have the old community bridges on the way to the dump. You have Horizon. You have places that provide mental health services and other substance abuse issues in the community that are not in a very established area in an old historic building. So I caution you on even approving at the maximum 6 because when you add 6, then you have the conditional abuse. And Dana said himself, well, we can do it on an individual basis. Oh, well, he turned that 1 bedroom that is huge, the 1 schoolroom, into 10 little rooms. So now I got 10 people in that 1 room. So I think you need to be, I think you really need to look at this closely. And I think there's some big issues going on here. We don't have the mental health services. And I guess my biggest issue with this, are these local people that are going to be served? Or are these people coming from the valley, right? Because property's a little cheaper here and all these other things are cheaper. And are they bringing the staff up from the valley? I mean, are these local people that are going to get the services? Or are they people coming from somewhere else? I gotta tell you what, I'd bet you $1 that these people are coming from the valley because they don't have the resources down there and they're shipping them up here for a bigger buck. So rehab programs, substance abuse recovery, the aging population, cognitive disability people, group homes, and other things like that are not economic development. There are services that a community needs, but it needs to be thoughtful. And I think this whole scenario is not thoughtful. So, thank you.
Understood. Point is very well taken. Thank you. Ready. And I'm just going to go through these one by one. We have.
Usually,
Yeah.
he has.
Yes, I have cards from you all. I'm going to call one by one. Okay. Margaret Crago?
No, he just said what I want.
Okay. All righty. Shannon Mote? Sharon Mote? Okay. Thank you. Rick Gates?
So these group homes, I understand it, is going to be for treatment and for elderly. Are you going to put those people in the same housing? No? You're going to keep them separate?
That would be my understanding.
That's my understanding.
Yeah, my understanding is this is 3 separate things. Could be handicap, it could be aged, they aged, or it could be recovery, but it's not going to be a mixed bag.
And up on Noster Hill, what facility is that? Is that
It's not specific to Nosker Hill, so I'm not even
No,
sure.
there-
Can we answer that?
We're not addressing a specific application. Dana, do you want to step in or just,
Yes, that's correct. We're only talking about the language that we have in our zoning code to allow for group homes
Okay,
and
so
a separate use for
Dr. Hack-
recovery.
homes
Can you
all
let,
over the
wait,
area.
can you let Dana finish? Okay. Go ahead, Dana.
Either to allow either the group home use, which is actually already allowed by right, up to 6 people per statute, or the recovery home use as well through an approval process like this, where they come before the commission and explain what they want. So it's 2 different things. They're very different licenses with the state, very different disciplines. So you wouldn't have one building with all these people, elderly and necessarily. Those are different licenses, different business operations typically that they get from licenses that they get from the state Department of Health, and how they in their business model. So no, it's either somebody's usually in the business of recovery homes or they're in the business of group homes. Is
And I
that
think-
clear? But we're not talking about any particular property. This is just an ordinance to change our code to allow this to be proposed in the future by somebody that owns a house or a building in the residential neighborhood.
So if he has houses in that neighborhood, he can't have recovering group homes, and you only have one, or is that what you're telling me?
Today, no. Well, you can have a group home for the elderly and handicapped with up to 6 people because of statute today.
No, what he's asking is the distance. So the distance, they have to be at least 1,200
Oh,
feet.
I apologize. Yes, we want to separate them all 1,200
1,200 feet
feet.
apart, that's correct.
I wonder how many of these homes are gonna be in your neighborhoods? Anybody? They're gonna be in your neighborhoods?
I live in yours.
You what?
I live in yours.
You live in mine?
Yeah.
Okay, then you got one in your neighborhood. How about you? You could have one in your neighborhood? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mary Helen Sanchez?
Good evening. I understand the need for assistance to those that have the elderly, recovery. I worked for a behavioral health facility for about 5 years. And although I was not clinical, I had to sit in on clinicals. When it's very true, if they have issues with drug abuse, it brings on a mental health episode, and it continues, and they are considered dual diagnosed. Because if you have mental illness and you engage in use of drugs, illegal or otherwise, it can bring on that episode. So many times these individuals are not just mentally ill, they are dual diagnosed, okay? So having, like Dr. Richardson wants to put, so many in a large building will really not be conducive to our neighborhood. We have small children. I also had, and let me just back this up, I created a business where I delivered medication to group homes, and it was a mess. It was a total mess because neighborhoods were lost, blight occurred, people started renting out their homes, they rented to anyone so they could at least make their mortgage. This is a great neighborhood. It has history. It's in the historical district. I moved here from Phoenix 5.5 years ago to get away from the chaos. I think it's again, we do have, unfortunately, we do have folks that need care, but putting them in a residential area simply because Dr. Richardson found a building in our area that says, hey, you know what? I want this done. Where is Dr. Richardson gonna be? And I know that they have to have a psychologist there, a psychiatrist. They have to have case managers. Are they gonna be dispensing medication? Because I know they will, because I used to deliver medication to group homes. So where is that safety? And we already have an influx an uncontrollable influx of drug abuse. And when someone realizes, geez, there's going to be some medication in that facility, how are they going to safeguard us? And I had to go to court not a couple weeks ago because someone was disturbing our peace, and it was with some of the folks that are here. And it was a couple of people that lived there. And the judge described what disturbing the peace was, and it was loud noise, fighting, all the disturbances, and it was disturbing our peace. So this would disturb our peace and how we look at this. We want to attract families that have small children. Our dynamics have changed where they're finding this is a really inexpensive area to purchase a home. But that was not the intent that I came here for. I wanted to have a safe environment, a quiet one where I can hear children play. One of our neighbors actually takes care of children. How safe is she going to feel, or those parents are going to feel, if we have some individuals that are in recovery? And we also have that ballpark. City of Globe has put in a lot of money to beautify that ballpark and to encourage great participation where children can go play, adults can go play baseball, they can just hang out, have a dog park. I have a really bad back condition, so I don't exercise, but if I could, I probably would not want to walk around in that area by myself. I already have cameras everywhere at my residence because I want to make sure that I'm safe. And this is not making me feel safe, not at all. And again, like Mr. Gates said, put yourselves in our place. How comfortable would you be if someone proposed this? And probably, I think Dr. Richardson probably does not live in this area. Again, I'm just, that's not factual, but I have a strong feeling, and he wants to pretty much, say, hey, this is a great place. How engaged is he going to be in ensuring that all of the so-called possible 25 folks are being cared for? I have seen that they are not cared for. I myself, because I, again, delivered medication to group homes, and I was actually shocked on how they got treated. Of course, that's a different story. However, the rooms that they were, if you were going to have two in a room, that's, how good is that? I mean, what's the purpose of their recovery if they're cramped up like animals? And that's exactly a real concern for me. And I really don't think, just like it was mentioned, this is a very slippery slope. Our property values are finally going up. Finally. I stood in front of a council meeting here when I first purchased my home 5.5 years ago, and I pretty much told the mayor, I said, there's a sign near the Wendy's that says Globe Clean and Beautiful, and I said Globe could be and should be clean and beautiful, but it's not, and this is not going to we're getting that neighborhood back where it should be. And they're beautiful homes, beautiful location. And again, I'm all for people, for helping those that need help. But putting them in a residential area is not where we want to go. It is not. Once you open that door, you will not ever be able to shut that door. And our property values are going to go down. And if you rezone, and I'm not I don't have the particulars or the knowledge to know this. How, if you rezone that, are you just rezoning that particular function? Or are you rezoning the residential to become a, something that can be rezoned? Or are you just rezoning how a residential area should look? See, those are things that folks need to really look at. You can rezone something, but how is it going to go down the road? And is it going to affect us moving forward? And someone else wants to put another type of business. Now we no longer have, we're not in a residential area, it's now mixed use area. And that is not why we moved to those neighborhoods. So those are my concerns. I understand that we have very ill people, and not only that, if you put 25 people, let's say the proposed one, that we could, because it is a large facility, the increased traffic, foot traffic, vehicular traffic, how are they going to transport these people? Are they going to be allowed visitors? That's going to increase more use of our streets and take up the limited parkings that we have. And I have to park on the street because the way my driveway is, I have a bad back, and that's convenient, and that would be inconveniencing me. I was there and have been there. And that was the purpose of purchasing a home in a very nice area. It has its charm. It really does. And I think it's a beautiful neighborhood. And, but it would be destroyed. It would absolutely be destroyed. Again, the city of Globe has invested money in improving that dog park, the park. We have enough already, way too much activity up in that park after dark. I'm telling you, if you have anything with recovery, it's unfortunate. It doesn't happen. Recovery is very few and far between. It is a revolving door. We just keep it at bay. So again, my concerns are increased traffic. How is that going to impact when there is an episode, someone running the streets, how that's going to actually impact the limited resources that we have with the police department. Okay? We have trouble recruiting policemen or police officers and retaining them. So that's going to overload what we already have. And I'm really opposed to that. What I'm not opposed to is finding appropriate care for these people in an appropriate setting. And Knobsker Hill is not the appropriate setting. Thank you.
I'd like to address a couple of points.
Yes.
That might help shed some further light, and then Dana might have a question as I kind of make my response. You mentioned the possibility of rezoning a given area to allow for this. I think what is currently being proposed here is actually not the specific rezoning of an area, but rather the text amendment to the current zoning ordinances. So it may still be residential 1 or, R2, a specific residential. So I don't think it's necessarily going to change a given neighborhood to mixed use. Now, I know that may not fully answer, everything that you're concerned about, but I do want to point out that Dana, the group homes for let's say elderly, and I believe also handicapped is lumped into that is already shall I say protected or defined by state statute. Is that correct? And
That's correct.
And
it already exists today. We're just codifying it to be consistent with the statute.
but substance abuse recovery homes are not subject to that state statute. Is that correct?
Correct.
So that would give the opportunity for a specific, something that's specific to the substance abuse recovery residences, that would give it the opportunity to befall under greater scrutiny and be subject to another public hearing such as we're having now. Is that correct?
Correct. On a specific property,
Okay.
should it be proposed? Yes.
Okay, so if one was to arise, then members of the community would be able to come up and voice their opinions about this a given matter for the substance abuse recovery homes.
Again, I just want to
think it's-
reiterate what Mr. Gates said. Put yourself on our position. And again, if you kind of do this here, it's easier for them to do it in another neighborhood. And that's not what, why people are moving here. We want to encourage, again, the elderly to come and retire here. That's what I'm trying to do. And we also want to encourage younger families to live here a very long time and actually add to our growth and possibly attract other businesses because we are growing, and that would increase jobs. And I think it's, again, very important that we take care of those that really need our care. But again, it should not be in residential areas that are established, and you're disrupting that type of environment. And it's not going to attract the people I feel that all of us want, the type of families and the comfort zone that we currently enjoy. So it would be against everything we enjoy, and it's disruptive because one individual wants, in his need, to try to assist. However, he's disrupting a lot of other people and that are not in recovery or not need our assistance. We just want we want to live the rest of our lives in a peaceful environment. That's all we ask. We're asking that, and as it was pointed out, there are other buildings that could possibly help in facilitating that type of care, and that would be less disruptive and easier access. And as it is, there's a lot of traffic on that street, and with that, and you're going to increase it with staff, 24-hour operation. When they get ill, there's more ambulances, there's fire trucks. That's disturbing my peace.
I would like to reiterate something though. What we're discussing tonight is actually not about the Knopfsker Hill. We're not specifically discussing that. And I understand your concern. You know, your point is very well taken, of course. We are making the text amendments to the existing zoning ordinance to basically, as Dana mentioned, codify or reflect for the senior and handicapped living,
Right.
what's already allowed by state statute.
And I'm very aware of those.
Okay, and then the recovery, when it comes to the substance abuse recovery, we would be allowing the specific language put forth to be entered into the zoning ordinance, but it's not a measure to approve of a specific home to be turned into a substance recovery home. Each of those cases would be handled as a case-by-case basis, and there would be a public hearing, much like what is going on tonight, for each individual case, whether that's Knopfsker Hill or some other building that may be utilized. So I just, because it sounds like the tone is placing a large amount of emphasis on the Knopfsker Hill building, and I just want to let you know that what we're discussing tonight is not specifically about that. So,
Right, because we all live in that area.
understood.
That's why.
Understood.
Okay, and that's why we have the emphasis on that.
Understood.
Okay,
No.
thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank
And I
you.
know you'll make the right decision for us.
All right, thank you very much. believe we just have one left. That is Will Medford. Would you like to approach?
How's it going? My name's Will Medford. And, I'm hearing everybody, and I know change can be scary. And I too moved from Phoenix, and just to let you know, I'm in a recovery family. My wife's in recovery, I'm in recovery. We have a little baby. We settled down in Globe, and when we were moving up here, there's actually like resources for people in recovery, that we find other recovery meetings. And we looked, and it said there were 7 here. I was like, good, we're good, because my continued clean time is very important to me. And I got my start in one of these places. People in recovery, when they go to a recovery home, that's somebody's son, daughter, mother. And they go there because they have a disease, not a moral deficiency. They have a disease. It's out of their control, right? Well, we get here, COVID shut down every recovery meeting in Globe. So you know what we did? We started one, Central Heights, at the River of Life Church, backed by Juanita, Tony. They live right over here. I just chip sealed their, right in front of their house, We pray for them. We attended church with them, and I get the fear around them. I also, when I lived in Phoenix, I managed an 85 male halfway house in Sunny Slope, 85 people, and those people, whether they got it the first time, the second time, the third time, the fourth time, they ended up getting it eventually, and they went on to be productive people. And I know for a fact on the other side of that curtain, a well-managed facility, you won't even know in your neighborhood, right? And then there's something also called the Florida model, which, because I intend to start one here, because Globe deserves a second chance. The nearest meeting outside of the nearest place is Phoenix or Safford, and so somebody seeking to stop, and on the same context as somebody who's elderly who can't take care of themselves. I go out behind Walmart and I feed them, and we tell them there's a different way to live. There's a different place. They go, where is it here in Globe? Because I love Globe. I don't want to leave. And you got many generations that have been here and they don't know any other way, right? But we don't have a home here for them to go to. The old Bailey house is closed, right? So there was one here. I think that the city needs to step in and enforce the health regulations that the state does regulate halfway houses, and that we shouldn't be secular to people in recovery. That's discrimination, in my opinion. Because you know what? My wife is the sweetest lady in the world, and she would gladly go volunteer, and she has, with people who have trouble, and they're elderly. She volunteers her time, which is priceless. And I believe that these people that can't stop because they have a disease deserve a place to get clean inside Globe in their home. I believe that the city of Globe should monitor everything, and we should take into account what neighborhoods we put them in. Absolutely 100%. And they should be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. But there shouldn't be a 6-person cap at all. I see these people. If the facility is big enough and isn't next to a school and isn't next to a place that's sensitive, then it should be as big as granted by its size. And we should follow the health department's regulations on sober living homes. Because those people who are addicted and who are sick, they, in Phoenix at one time before the health department stepped in, took advantage of these people. Had to give up their food stamps, give up their resources, their cash assistance. That was how they paid rent. These people would just steal from the weak. And I think that the city stepping in and monitoring and regulating and protecting the rights of the sick, because they are diseased people. Active addiction is a disease. It's in the DSM. I want to remind you that Scottsdale, $1 million homes in $1 million home neighborhoods, there are halfway houses. under the Florida model. Okay? And in Prescott has something that they refer to as a recovery economy. It's these people that go to these homes, they find recovery, they got nothing else to do but live in recovery, go to meetings, and then they do things like start coffee shops. And then you know what else they do when they live right? They pay their taxes. They pay their business taxes. They go to work. There's positives to have, and it all starts with a safe place for them to get clean. If I didn't have a safe place to get clean, I wouldn't be here. My daughter wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be married to my wife. I wouldn't be living a life beyond my wildest dreams, because I wanted to escape Phoenix because it was getting crazy there. And when we came through Globe for the first time, we drove up Ash and everything, fell in love with the place. And within 8 months, we were living here, you know? And so we dedicate our time to helping the homeless. We go and we walk the opioid, you know, the walk of hope up here, you know, and we go and we support people because the drugs are killing people. The drugs are killing people. The drugs are driving the people to steal. The drugs are driving you to people to make an environment where you have to have cameras. You know what I mean? Like it literally it's a disease in the city, but we don't have local resources for people who don't want to leave Globe. You know, and there's like I call it the Globonian pride. If you're from Globe, you know it. You're just proud to be from Globe. And when we try to ship them out to Phoenix, they're like, no, we don't want to leave home. You know, so I believe that if this is zoned correctly, like it's being suggested, it's written into our ordinance, it's case by case basis. We don't put a cap on 6 people, because then you're gonna have to open like 36 places. You know what I mean? Like, but if the facility warrants the size, and it's, you know, and it's in places that are not sensitive, that are kind of away from schools, you know, and we get the public in on this too, and then they can see that this thing really does work and it helps people, and that's all I gotta say. Thanks for letting me talk.
Thanks, sir. Okay. So before we wrap up the public hearing, is there anyone else who might like to comment on the matter at hand? Emails? Okay. Okay. Yes.
This is from Ginny and Rosemary Chilango, who live at 273 Bryant Street in Globe. They strongly disagree with the city on the retail need to have care facilities in residential areas. The area that we live in was for residential, not care facilities. Emails from Dennis and Julie Palmer. It is our understanding that the council is writing a code for group homes. The code for a group home should currently stay at a maximum of 6 residents in the residential area. We often have the pleasure of visiting your charming city to dine, shop, and rent. Please take care of the residents of Florida. This comment is from Wendy Stanfeld and Jordan Meek. My wife and I and our two of our children live at 1027 East or Northeast Street in Globe, and we've lived here for over 17 years. We also own the house across the street at 1030 Northeast Street that their daughter Jordan lives in, and their 2 grandchildren. I understand the need for and the importance of in maintaining aging properties and care facilities. My wife and I and my adult daughter Jordan, however, do not support considering the location for these facilities in residential neighborhoods. I do not want this type of business next to my home or the home where my grandchildren live. These facilities would be better positioned in areas easily located with wider roads, adequate lighting, and parking for care professionals and potential of emergency vehicles when needed. I do not know what occupant load is being considered, but if a care facility is to operate in a residential neighborhood, I suggest no more than 6, including care professionals regardless the size of the facilities. Without a limit, there is no way to govern how many people can be in any said facility. If we do not stop this from happening or limit the amount of people allowed in these facilities in residential areas, the value of our homes will drop and families will end up leaving. Please help. Here is a comment from Wendy Stanfield. She supports the idea of limiting the amount of residents in a building in a zoned residential area to 6 adults. And I have one more from Terry Salazar, who lives at 429 East Cupright in Globe. This is in regards to the decision of whether or not to allow care facilities in residential neighborhoods. The impact of such facilities can have a very profound negative effect on such neighborhoods, such as personal safety for residents, property damage, noise pollution, traffic congestion, emotional impacts on vulnerable children in the area, as well as property deterioration, especially in older established neighborhoods where a majority of residents are elderly, widowed, and also vulnerable. The county has multiple more prudent avenues to choose from, which would have a far less impact on its citizens and their well-being. For instance, a large empty parking lot next to the courthouse that was once a grocery store, many empty available warehouses on Main Street, as well as plenty of property at the Gila County Fairgrounds, which also houses the prison. I ask that you consider these possibilities as the better option for everyone involved. I also ask that before you make any decision that will affect us all, take a moment to really consider if you yourselves are willing to have such care facilities in your own neighborhood. Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, I have one more, the Tanner.
I
So,
think Dana ran Tanner's.
the,
It was in his presentation.
okay, that was Tanner's, okay, good.
Hunsaker, was it?
Yeah,
Yes, I believe we.
okay. And anything else?
No. Oh, I do have one.
Let's see, check here.
I live near Nosker Hill School. My concern is that streets are too narrow in that and most areas. Many times I have been coming up Haskins Road when a car or truck speeding down the middle of the road. Also going head on with myself. Added traffic in most residential areas can't handle the increased personal, patient, and visitors. I think that's it, Mr. Chair.
So, with those having been read, I will close the public hearing for further discussion amongst the commission. Okay, public hearing is now closed. This is a lot to think about. I sense the opposition from the public as far as concern, especially for the recovery homes. In a case of if a specific building was to be transformed into a recovery home, there'd be a time and place for that exact feature to be discussed, and it would be subject to the proceedings that we are currently having tonight. So there would be the opportunity for a public hearing on an individual case-by-case basis. Is there any comments or questions by fellow commissioners that?
I have a comment. Since we are just codifying this, and so I agree. I know I recognize we need to do it. I recognize that the state, of course, and mandates it on a couple of them and everything. So from the zoning part of it, I can accept this as long as we keep the cap of 6 and we don't allow for any deviation in there except for by a case-by-case basis. So I don't want any language in there that says that if the building's big enough or whatever, that they can be more than 6. I want to see a firm cap of 6, and then we recognize that every time a building comes up, we can look and see if something more than 6 makes sense. The state of Arizona, most of the cities, they all limit it to 6, so it seems like a reasonable number. Why we want to, no offense to Dr. Richardson, my son's a doctor, so I can appreciate what he's doing, but I don't think that based on this one business coming in, we should change it to reflect anything but a max of 6.
Bodie, any further comments or questions on this?
No, sir, I really concur with what you're saying. I mean, I counted 12 plus possible oppositions, although one of them sounded like they may have never been from here or lived here. But, I mean, there's a lot to consider here. pretty detailed, reasons for the opposition. So a lot to consider.
It is, yeah, it is. Especially with the substance abuse recovery, that seems to be the controversial issue here. And again, with the elderly or handicap homes, they appear to be already provided by state statute. It may be more of a formality than anything for the city of Globe to also be reflecting that in their zoning ordinances. So I think that is not the main concern of everyone tonight. And Tracy, you'd like to see the capacity to be held at
Yeah,
at
yeah,
6.
and then we can look at it case by case. The one that Dana showed that's out by on Hagen or something, looks like it could hold, far more than that. And so, on a case by case, there's other buildings, Nosker clearly one of them, that could hold more than 6, but I don't believe in that neighborhood that it should be a consideration. So if we just leave it at 6 and then case by case, then, just zone it and leave it that way. And then if we have this many people coming in saying that they'd like to see 25 go into some building, well, then that would be way better than this many people coming and saying, we don't even want 6 in our neighborhood.
Dana, could we look at that language again on the screen? Because you had modified it. I want to make sure that we're looking at that language. So if we recommend this approval of this ordinance, then we are still allowing ourselves a case-by-case approval of each request to create a facility like this, whether it's a group home or a recovery home, because I feel like that's part of the zoning code, is that you set the standard and then not everything has to come case by case. So I want to make sure that if we want to see it case by case, that there's language in here towards that. Because I don't think I've seen that yet. Oh, you're on mute, Dana.
No volume.
Good try.
Apologize. The only way to look at that case by case is we have to have a trigger in there somehow. So as of right now, any recovery home is by use permit. And the way the code's written is no more max of 6. And then Dr. Will's suggesting this other language to allow for more. But as of right now, every recovery home would, in any house or structure, would come before the commission.
Okay, that's what I didn't understand. Thank you for
To
clarifying.
get more than 6, you'd have to have language to allow that. We couldn't do it we couldn't do it legislatively or through your discretion, like bring a use permit before you, that when your code says max of 6 and somebody says, well, I want 12, we would say, well, you'll be violating your own code. We're going to have a problem if we permit somebody to do that. Now you've opened Pandora's box in that situation.
So Dana, this would be a hard cap and not even council could adjust it. It's just a hard cap.
That's correct. They'd have to go through and amend the text of the zoning code to allow for more than 6. Or, yeah, you just remove the number, which I'm not going to suggest you do altogether, and leave it like, don't restrict recovery residences to 6. Either way, whatever the request is, it has to come, it's going to come before the commission and possibly the council. If there's opposition, it would get elevated to city council decision in that case. So if you just remove that number, then you know what you're going to see. So I like the idea of having a 6 and then that extra measure if you're going to do that, to say, hey, we need to look at traffic. Like they mentioned, some streets might not be able to support the traffic or visitors or whatever it is. And we might have strict controls through the use permit process of who can attend there, how many trips per day are going there, and no visitors, or whatever it is. That's why you have that use process, to look at those potential impacts and to mitigate them through conditions.
So is it possible to, I know I sound like a broken record, is it possible to actually see that language of what you're suggesting right there, or what we've talked about, where we've got the 6 and then we've got the conditional use permit tag on there?
Yes, Chairman, Commissioner Lowry, I went ahead and modified. So you see the motion as I'm recommending the text is written. Then should commission wish to include suggested tests, I went ahead and did that modification that we discussed earlier, which is basically because we realize we want that opportunity as well for big old existing structures to have elderly too, right? So we are going to take that language and move it to section 6 of the group home language, and modify section I of the recovery residences text to say maintain compliance with group homes for the handicap criteria of this zoning district. I changed it to zoning district. It said this section, and I think that was too limiting. I put it to the zoning district to make sure I can get into the details, but this is technically correct. If you want the ability to allow for somebody to have a group home greater than 6 or a recovery residence greater than 6. Either way, it's coming to you for conditional use permit review and approval. Does that make sense?
It does, thank you.
I'd just like to go over with the commission once more regarding the maximum occupancy. Tracy, I think we know your position on a maximum of 6. How do you guys feel about the number 6 being the maximum?
I agree with Commissioner Quick because of the precedent that we saw in all of these other communities. So we looked at Gilbert, we looked at Chandler. There's a whole bunch of different documents that were provided to us in advance to see what other communities have done. And that was the standard, as you mentioned. So I think that there's precedent for that. I don't think that's going to solve all our problems. I think we're still going to have some growing pains, and I think that's what we're hearing today. And I think that that's a call to action to the city and to people like us to make sure that we don't just approve this and then good luck, right? Like, we have to start building up that infrastructure that's going to support this type of growth. Right? I agree. This is not economic development. I agree that it is a service that's needed in the community, and we need to manage that very carefully. These are our family members. These are people just like us. I'm getting upset just thinking about it because these are people. We have to care for them too. And we want to do that responsibly, to honor property values, to honor safety and all of that. So I do think, I'm getting all upset, I'm sorry. I do think that the right balance is what Commissioner Quick has suggested tonight. I don't think that it can stop here. I think that we have to make sure that we're actively working towards building the infrastructure that's going to support our community and these recovery centers. So I would be in favor of a motion that is along the lines of what Commissioner Quick suggested.
Would that be text as it's currently written?
No, as I understand it, that, oh gosh, let's see. I mean, let's say that the community wants to increase it over time. I mean, this pitch could come back to the Planning and Zoning Commission if we're on it, or if other people are on it in the future, and the number could be increased then, right? So we're just setting a number for today. We're gonna stay with 6. And then in the future, if the community needs it, then that Planning and Zoning Commission can approve a higher number. Tracy, is that what you're talking about?
Well, no, I think that we're going to look at individual basis when they come in and when they want to do something with the building.
Okay.
Say, for instance, they come in for Dr. Richardson is specifically interested in Oscar. So if he wants to come to us, right now it's set at 6, and that's what he's got to work with. And then he's got to come before us and convince us why we should let him, just using him as an example, get to just say 25 because Dana said that that's, a potential number for it. Or if it's in another building. So as long as we set it at 6, so we have a threshold that is, like you say, is a precedent that has been set. And then we look at them at an individual basis, because some of the buildings he was showing clearly could have more than 6 and not affect, an existing neighborhood. And so that as long as we look at it as an individual basis, I'd say 6, and then we look at it one by one.
So then that language, what you just described, that would be this, we would be accepting Dr. Richardson's
No,
modification.
no, not at all.
I'd like to ask Dana real quick, based on Tracy's what I understand to be her perspective of it. Currently, the language would allow for a maximum of 6, no matter what. There would have to be that additional agenda item to even potentially allow for more than 6. Is that correct?
That's correct. Right now, no matter what, as it's proposed, let's say you adopt the language as I drafted it, it's proposed, somebody could come in and ask for a recovery residence through a conditional use permit, and you would review that. But it would be capped at 6. They couldn't, no matter what, they have to come to you for a conditional use permit for 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 6 people for recovery residence.
So if
as
someone
it's
came to
written
us
today.
about one of those big
You don't have the,
nowhere, we couldn't approve it because the
Correct.
language would restrict it to 6.
No, that's not true.
But that's what, and I'm not.
No, I
arguing
don't think you're understanding. I think Dana, or I'm completely confused. It's capped at 6, so that if they needed more than 6, I think, did you just say with the recovery, they have to come for a conditional use permit every time, even if it was only gonna be 6?
recovery residence, no matter what.
Recovery,
1
so then-
through 6 in our code is written to not allow more than 6 at all. So you wouldn't have the discretion to increase that. Without language in the code, like what Dr. Richardson has provided, and I can summarize here, that would allow that to come forward. And the way we've talked about it, we could also apply that to the group homes too. But yeah, you would have to allow for some mechanism to allow more than 6.
I don't have a problem with that as long as we're sitting at 6.
So just a little, Tracy, maybe the CUP process can still be there, but the CUP process can't override the hard cap of 6.
Unless we rezoned it again.
You'd have to go through this whole process again with the 3 different, the postings and all of this. It'd be unpractical.
And we couldn't just rezone one property to a PAD to allow whatever, that's spot zoning, and we would have an issue with that.
So that's
of
kind
just
of the thing, is
reasoning
we
one
have to decide, are we setting it at 6? That's it. Or are we putting in some language to allow it to be increased for specific facilities on a case-by-case basis?
And I'll say it again, as long as at case by case, they have to come in and present their case, and 6 is what they're given for the limit, and if they want to come, they have to present a case and come convince us. I don't have a problem with that as long as the language specifically makes it to where they've got to come before
Yep.
the zoning. Well, say so.
Chairman and
No, I'm just
Commissioners,
trying to, and Tracy, you and I are aligned as far as the intention of it. I'm just trying to make sure I understand the language. That's where all this.
Yeah, well, and I do see where that he does have a conditional use permit in there. So as long as it's written at 6 and there's the language and property owners are protected and have the right to come and speak out on everything, then I can get on board with that.
Okay, I think just to kind of reiterate and further clarify, it sounds like even if we handle this on a case-by-case basis for each and every case with the way it's written, it's they can't really convince us to allow more than 6 unless we had additional language inside of the zoning ordinance. That is my understanding. So it's a hard cap, and if it was to be more than 6, we would have to go through this process all over again to increase it beyond 6. And I guess I'd like to just kind of throw out the possibility, I suppose it's possible to set the bar at 6, where that's the general rule of thumb. And if there were more, if there was a specific reason to go over 6, it might warrant some stronger stipulations. And we could even potentially imagine it as a second tier, rather than, from 0 to 6, and then after that it's 6 to infinity. It could potentially be from 0 to 6, there's given stipulations, and then there could be additional language that even says more than 6, but not more than 12. And so instead of just, 6 to whatever number onward, there could be a second capacity, and maybe that tier would have to fulfill some more stringent regulations within the zoning. So that's just throwing that out as a matter to think about. Not saying that should or shouldn't be the exact amended language, but instead of being an all or nothing sort of deal, it's possible for that amendment to be made. But as my understanding of this as it's currently written is that it is a hard cap at 6, and there is no more unless we went through this process again to further amend the language. So and that is of course as it is written, without Dr. Richardson's suggestion. And even then, if I may say so, if we were to even consider what Dr. Richardson is posing, I would like to see that not be exclusive to recovery homes, but to also include group homes in general, including elderly, handicapped.
I'd kind of like to see it in writing.
So, Chairman, Commissioners, if I can take you through real quick. So we're gonna take this language: Planning and Zoning Commission may approve a home, basically Dr. Will Richardson's discussion right there, or note there, with the A, B, and C, and D, and locate that as 6.
So I'm sorry, Dana, all of his suggestions would fall under 6 on here then?
Correct.
As written?
It would, yep, exactly. So what that'll do is basically say group homes are allowed this. And if you want more than 6, you need to show that it complies with these 4 criteria that was written there. Right, that would all be there. So then we go down to then the recovery resident section in the same zoning district. And we say, oh, recovery residents are allowed by use permits because it's a different section. Group homes are allowed by right. So that's why it's written in a different section. It's a permitted use. There's a list of permitted uses in all the zoning districts. So anyway, that's allowed by right. We add 6 to that. It says, I can apply for a use permit for a group home, and I can get more if I've got a big house or a facility of some sort, like we discussed. And then, oh, wait a minute, I want a recovery residence. Okay, what do I have to do? Oh, I got to get a use permit no matter what, because it's in the use permit section, but I need more than 6 people because I got this big building or whatever it is. So, group homes I need my first maintain compliance with group homes for the handicap criteria of this section. And I've got a little fix to this section part. I'm going to say, because use is permitted and conditional uses permitted by conditional use permit could be construed as 2 different sections. So that's why I rewrote that little portion, and I'll show it to you in a second. But anyway, I'm getting off track. But basically, as long as they're in compliance with the group homes for the handicap criteria of the section, and then they need to do all 2 and all of that too, and get a use permit. Well, group home section would have 6 that allows more than 6 through a conditional use permit. So that would then allow for a recovery home to ask for more, to utilize that section, because item I says maintain compliance for group homes and group homes for the handicapped. And that section allows you to get more than 6. if you get a use permit and you show that you can meet all this criteria, no traffic and traffic that's manageable within the roadway network and so forth. So that's it. And that's how I typed or retyped this motion to amend the staff's recommendation with an amendment to include the suggested language from Dr. Richardson as section 6 of the group home language, and modify section I of the recovery residences language to say maintain compliance. This is the little fix I was just telling you about. Maintain compliance with group homes for the handicap criteria of this zoning district. So now it's broad. Anyway, for me, technically, that's more correct to have that zoning district part instead of this section, how it was written in Dr. Will's. I'm sorry, as it was written in my original text here, of this section, I changed that to of the zoning district. We're getting into the technicality there. That might be a hard one. But basically, it's allowing it for group homes with that language that I have in that recommendation. And it would also apply to, and same with group, all that same criteria would apply to group homes too. They'd need to be an existing structure. You'd have to comply with all applicable fire and building code and occupancy. And it needed to receive a state license for said occupancy, and is found to have adequate access for the additional traffic volumes generated and will maintain the surrounding neighborhood character. So a group home could do that, and a recovery residence could do that if they wanted more than 6. So if that's clear, and from the direction it sounds like the commission, it would be, we were going to move to recommend council approve ordinance 882 with the amendment to include the suggested language from Dr. Richardson as section 6 of the group home language, and modify section I of recovery residences to have zoning district instead of section. Does that sound like it makes sense?
Yes.
Yes, Dana, I apologize if I'm making you repeat yourself. I was just kind of thinking about some things here, but I just want to confirm that as far as the amendment proposed by Dr. Richardson, his specific wording refers to only recovery residents, but you mentioned that you worded it in a specific way that refers to group homes in general, not just recovery residences?
Correct. We're just taking, looking at the screen there, we're just taking beginning at the Planning and Zoning Commission may approve a home to contain more than 6. And then that up right up above, yeah, he wrote recovery residence section by adding section 3 as follows. And we're saying, no, we're going to add this language as follows to section and create a section 6 in group home.
Okay.
Yeah. And so now group homes or recovery residences would have that same opportunity to apply by use permit.
Okay.
More than 6. And then keep in mind, when you review those and hearing this conversation, I know these are going to be scrutinized, particularly the traffic and the access and everything. So if the commission were to say, hey, we'll give you 10, 12, 15 residents, maybe in a big building or something like that, come back in a couple of years and we'll talk about more if it's going good or whatever. But there are ways that you can approach those use permits to have more of a scale that you're comfortable with. Anyway, but now we're getting ahead of ourselves and we're talking about use permits. But there is that option when you're doing, there's a lot of flexibility in use permits.
Dana, can you go back one slide? I guess the one I'm looking for is where you have the suggested language. Yeah, there it is. So it was forward. Thank you.
So for the commission is, and Dana, could you, well, if you're done, Mary, can we? Go
Yes,
back one
I'm
slide?
done. I'm sorry. I was talking out loud. I was just writing it down so I knew what to suggest.
Dana, could we go back one slide?
Yes.
So, for the commission, how does everyone feel as far as it looks like there's 4 entries, the criteria for the subject facility to meet, is an existing structure, complies with all applicable fire and building code requirements for the occupancy being requested, receives a state license for said occupancy, is found to have adequate access for the additional traffic volumes generated, and maintains the surrounding neighborhood character. Is there any additional stipulations or regulations that ought to be appended to what currently exists for existing entries?
Nothing that I can think of.
I'm good with this.
Billy, as far as handling this, shall we start with, the motion to approve with the, suggested language, and if that was to fail, then we can fall it back on just the language as it is currently written?
You would have to call for a new motion.
Okay, well, sure, yeah, but if we first start off by calling for the motion to approve of it with the amendment, and if that was to fail, then we call a second motion to just accept it as it's currently written without the amendment.
Correct.
Okay.
The motion would die if there was no.
Sure.
no-
Sure, okay. So in that case, if there needs to be any further discussion by the commission on this topic, we should do so now, or it could be, motion could be made to adopt it with the amendment.
All right, I make a motion to recommend the council approve ordinance number 882 to allow group homes for the handicapped and substance abuse recovery residences to be located in the residential zoning districts, case Z TA-22-02 with amendment to include suggested language of Dr. Richardson as section 5 of the group home language, and modify section I of recovery residences, quote, maintain compliance with group homes for the handicap criteria of the zoning district, end quote.
Second the motion.
If we could have one, that was section 6. I think you mentioned section 5, Commissioner.
Thank you, Dana. Roman numerals.
Motion is seconded. It's time to call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion is unanimous amongst the commission. Motion passed. So, moving on to number 2, future agenda items and scheduling of meetings.
Thank you, everybody.
Shelley, is that you?
That's Dana.
Okay.
My apologies, I'm just getting caught up here. Future agenda items. We have, if you recall,
Thank
Airbnb.
everyone for voicing your opinions. We
Thank you.
do appreciate it. Sorry, Dana.
Next Tuesday evening, 6 o'clock, City Council will hold a public hearing as well on this agenda item for the public's knowledge.
That while they were all still here.
Okay,
Well, I think there has to be public notice for that as well, but I understand, yeah. I
Who
understand.
does
That was
so?
a good catch, Tracy. Yeah.
We're sorry, Dana. everyone was here for the recovery home, and they just left. So I don't think they heard your last comment. Everyone was kind of leaving, as you mentioned.
Oh, well, hopefully we have their addresses or, remind them. Very good. So up and coming Airbnb text amendment, we don't provide for them right now, and we need to, or otherwise what's been happening is they just happen because the state again said cities can't regulate with very limited restrictions, but those restrictions are helpful and allow us to put measures in place to have licensing and things like that, and then ways to ensure that there's not going to be any parties and stuff like that that can regulated. So anyway, I'll bring that before you. You have that text amendment. There's another text amendment need to bring that you already reviewed and initiated. I think it was the construction trailers to inhabit a construction trailer on a site during the period of a active business license. And then I know the city is very excited to move forward with expanding the historic preservation overlay district. That's in a very narrow area of downtown right now. Your zoning map shows it incorrectly as expanded across the 60 along Broad. So that's going to expand. And Dylan, I think your house might be in it too. I apologize for breaking that. No, it's a great opportunity, and it solves a lot of problems that we've had. You heard some of that conversation with the Hill Street School discussion. So it's a way to really acknowledge this historical presence in nature and character of that downtown and all of that the oldest area of the community, and then preserve it and to enhance and to have uses that are very different than, that are conducive to downtown activity and lifestyles and so forth. So anyway, those you'll see in the summer here. Other than that, right now, I don't have a specific date for you to meet. I think you're going to have the next meeting off possibly. I'll feel you out. Maybe I get the advertisements out and just move forward with the Airbnb info and stuff, and not take the time we took with this one or these two, since you all seem to be running really fast with it. But anyway, that's it. Nothing.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, just Dana real quick. We already have a pretty full agenda on the 24th. If we had to push this back, would we be able to, or?
We'd have to re-advertise.
Okay.
It'd take 21 days at a minimum.
Okay. All right, thank you.
That's it.
All right, and there's no motion to accept the future agenda items, correct? No, so we could motion to adjourn if commission is ready.
Motion to adjourn. I was teasing you,
I like to, let motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion seconded. This meeting is now adjourned.
That's okay. I like to spread the,
Yeah. No, I was teasing.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Dana.
This was an
Thank you, Dana.
excellent document. It was very, very helpful in understanding what the other cities are doing and what the recommendations were. And so I really appreciate this document that you put together for this.
You know what, I do want to say something.